Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to go over some of my favorite decks to include when I'm thinking about doing a certain spellcraft or spell working, however you want to word that, as well as some ritual practices that I have. The decks that I like to use for that. So I only have so much time today, so I just kind of want to go over this quickly. I just have some water here, so feel free to join me in a beverage. As always, I can't help but mention the Witch Sister Tarot. So it is important to mention that when it comes to spell workings, I work a lot with color, glamour magic, so makeup, art as well. So a lot of these decks that I'm going to mention apart from this one are going to align with those types of practices, those magical practices. However, I find that the Witch Sister Tarot is an excellent deck. I feel like you can use it for so many different practices. You don't have to just use this in glamour magic or color magic. I, of course, like to use it for those practices because of the bright, vivid colors, and Julia Jeffrey's artwork is absolutely gorgeous. I really like her use of color. It's a very powerful deck. It works a lot with Scottish mythology and folklore. And my mother is actually Scottish, so I am half Scottish, so it also aligns with my ancestors. I do feel a very strong connection to my ancestry through this deck, so it has even more of a connection to me. I use it for so many different things, but particularly spellcraft. As I've already mentioned, I do like her use of colors, and I like to incorporate the colors that I see on her cards that I pick for my day, just to get an energy outlook. I will incorporate the colors that I see in her cards onto my face, sometimes my body, my jewelry, and it's how I like to work with those energies and how I engage with those energies as well. So like I said, I think that this deck is excellent for all types of practices. That's why I included it in today's video. I don't think that you have to use it in the ways that I do. That's just how I like to work with it, but I do feel that it can be incredibly helpful and useful for so many different purposes and reasons when it comes to working a specific magical working. You can incorporate the different animals that you see as well if you like to work with animal energy, and if you want to work with a particular animal. All her cards mention an animal for the most part. I think that there are a few that don't. However, there is a lot of animal energy in this deck, so you can work with it in that sense as well. You can work with the animal energy, incorporating that into a specific spellcraft or spell working that you're trying to engage with. So that's another route that you can go, and I absolutely love working with the animal energy and symbolism in her deck. I work with a lot of archetypal energies and symbolism on my path, so that's another reason why I absolutely love this deck. And it gives it additional meanings. I find additional divinatory meanings. So that is the Witch Sister Tarot. Another incredibly powerful deck. I know a lot of people have this deck. It's the Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle. This deck is incredibly powerful. It's very beautiful. It has a very sexy and seductive energy to it. It aligns very well to the Samhain Sabbath. This is excellent for ritual use as well as spell crafting. When I'm working with specific energies, particularly spider energy, I like to work with this deck. And I find that it's very helpful when when I'm trying to work with, I guess, certain phases of the dark feminine and more even animal energies that I align more with the dark feminine, I find this deck to be very helpful when I'm trying to do a particular working with that energy. Not just spell crafting, but certain practices, rituals that I'm trying to engage in. This deck is incredibly, incredibly powerful for that. It's excellent for working the dark. It's excellent for working or engaging in the dark moon cycle, like the dark lunar cycle. I like to work with my Seasons of the Witch series. I have 4 of them. I align them to the 4 seasons, and I like working with my period with the decks. So I align certain, certain areas of my cycle with the 4 seasons, and then I like to, I assigned a deck for each. This deck is very powerful for release, for shadow work, working shadow magic or death magic. Working with serpent energy and spider energy, particularly spider energy. I feel a very strong connection to this deck. Just as I said that, I pulled the owl card here, so you might find yourself drawn to working with owl energy with this deck as well. So that is the Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle. This is slowly becoming one of my favorite decks in my entire collection. It is becoming one of my very favorite decks of this series as well. Next is the Talisman Oracle. So I don't use this deck as much as I really should. I've used it for shadow work, but I also like to work with it similarly to the Archetypes, Wild Unknown Archetypes deck, which is also on this list. I use it to understand, as well as to see what energies and symbolism I'm working with on my path. As I've mentioned, I do work with a lot of symbolism on my path. I work with a lot of myth, particularly seeking the symbolism behind myths. Not necessarily the myths itself. I try and seek what's under the myth, what the myth means, and working more with that energy as opposed to taking the myth as gospel. So I sort of engage with this deck in that way. I like to look at the different symbolism present within each card, and I work with it in that way. This is excellent also for bringing in animal energy into your practice or your spell crafting, and that's why I really appreciate this deck. I also like the dark and light imagery. It's very effective at shadow work for that. But I think that this is an excellent deck for engaging in those practices. I don't necessarily pull for this deck when I'm trying to do a specific glamour magic spell. So if I'm trying to spell craft using color, I clearly wouldn't pull for this deck unless I'm trying to do maybe a black and white smoky eye, but I don't tend to do those very often, at least right now. So the last 2 decks that I particularly want to mention for Spellcraft here, I have the one that I sort of briefly mentioned already. I've talked a lot about this deck on my channel. This is the Wild Unknown Archetypes deck. I consider this to be one of the most powerful decks in my collection. It's excellent for understanding what archetypes we are experiencing on our path. Myths, this is an excellent deck for really narrowing in or focusing on specific energies that you're engaging with on your path. It's excellent for crafting journal prompts or tarot spreads because of its ability to really focus energy. I find it really particularly powerful and adept at doing that. So I like to work with it in that sense, like in the creation of journal prompts, tarot spreads, even the creation of videos or practices. Archetypal energy can be very profound and it can be very helpful when it comes to those types of things. I like to work with the color as well on this deck, incorporating them into makeup looks when I'm trying to do a specific spell. I will even pull certain cards that I like and I'm looking for an example here. Like for the Siren, you can even pull a card and work with this Oracle card in a spell to draw that energy in. You can work with the colors, for example, or you can work with the element associated with the specific archetype. So for example, the Siren is connected to the water element, so you can work with it in those ways. Of course, if you want me to be more specific, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll do a dedicated video to that. But I just find archetypes really very helpful, not just for spell crafting and for creating and engaging in certain practices on our spiritual path, but just to get an overall idea of what archetypes that we're engaging in, what energies, what themes we're dealing with. I like to pull one card a week to get a very good idea of what themes I'm going to be dealing with that week. And I don't know, for example, this week I pulled the Pilgrim. So to me, that's telling me that I'm sort of bored engaging in specific practices, which it's true. I've been, as I've mentioned on my channel before, I've been incredibly drawn to the Siren and Mermaid archetype, doing a lot of ritual and spell crafting with that archetype. That this week I wasn't feeling it. I'm taking a bit of a break from that archetype and I went back to my tried and true archetypes, working with Spider again, the dark feminine, Lilith, Hecate, and you can probably tell just by looking at me. But I will eventually go back and work with the Mermaid and Siren archetype because we still have work to do. But I think that it's not a bad idea to try something new or to take something older that you've done, taking those practices, those older practices, and sort of giving them a new spin or a new twist, which is what I'm doing this week. So it's nice to kind of have that break, knowing that you're going to go back to it, of course. So that again is the Wild Unknown archetypes. The last deck, at least part of this portion of the video when it comes to spell crafting, is the Secret Language of Color cards. So as I mentioned, I think more recently on my channel, this is a more recent purchase and I've been working with it quite diligently. This is a very powerful deck for specifically spell crafting. When I'm trying to engage in a specific energy, whether to attract or to repel, I like to pull sometimes from this card. If I'm trying to do a specific spell, sometimes I'll come to this deck and I'll ask what colors I should incorporate into my makeup that day. Because as I've mentioned, I do a lot of glamour magic, really specifically incorporating the use of color. So this deck it's a very niche deck, I'd have to say. Do I think that if you engage in color or glamour magic, you need this deck? No, of course not. Do I think that it's helpful? Yes. I think if you already invested in this deck and it's just sort of laying around, I would encourage you to pull it out and to experiment with it, talk to it, get to know it. It fills a very niche role, but it's good at filling that niche role, if you know what I'm saying. Again, we have very bright, vivid colors. I'm still getting to know the deck, but it's pretty easy to read if you know your color correspondences. It's very easy to get to know. However, if you are new to color magic and working with color on your spiritual practice or your spiritual path, it's a good deck to learn color correspondences because the guidebook does give you some information on what color or what each color represents. I would, of course, encourage you to work with the guidebook, but to also listen to your intuition if you're new to color magic. Don't be shy to create your own color correspondences using your intuition and how the colors make you feel, especially when you're wearing them. I will even go as far as to ask a tarot deck like my Witch Sister Tarot what, specific colors represent to me. So if you do have tarot decks and you do incorporate the use of tarot in your practice, you can always do that as well if you're new to color correspondences. Or even if you just are looking at expanding your color correspondences. I actually forgot that I also have this deck. I've recently incorporated this into my spellcrafting. This is the Tarot of the Hidden Realms. This is another Julia Jeffrey deck. So of course, I treat it very similarly to the Witch Sister Tarot, at least in how I incorporate it into my spiritual practice. The deck has a very different energy to it. This is particularly working with the Fae. However, I don't work with the Fae on my spiritual practice, at least not consciously, that's not a particular intention that I've set for myself. So I predominantly approach this deck. To me, this deck has a lot of maiden energy, and it aligns very well with the spring season because of that. So those are the qualities that I mostly engage with when I'm working with this deck. I, however, work with this deck very similarly to my Witch Sister Tarot when it comes to spellcraft. So I'll pull a card to get an idea of what I'm dealing with that day, and then to further engage with that energy, I will sometimes incorporate the different colors that I see on the card into my makeup look or on my body as jewelry or clothing, really working with color. Or sometimes I will combat the energy, like particularly if I know shit's gonna hit the fan that day. I would most likely want to wear more browns, or more grounding colors. Navy blue, which is a very regal, kind of prideful energy. It typically keeps me more calm, so I will probably wear a lot of blue that day, or usually it's brown, to be honest with you. It's a very grounding color for me. So those are typically how I would engage in spell work when it comes to working with the tarot and color. That's just me. Of course, I'm just, I like to watch these types of videos to get an idea of how other people are working with their decks. I I like my decks to be used, and I like to experiment with them to see what works and what doesn't work, and I think that these videos can be very helpful for others. I like to watch them too. I'm always curious about how people use their decks. I was gonna go over the decks that I work with in Ritual, but I just looked at how long this video is, so I think I'm gonna save that for a future video. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.